leading digital transformation in a dynamic environment. And we're extremely happy to welcome Steve Suarez. And Steve is the Global Head of Risk Transformation and Innovation at HSBC. He has 27 years of experience in a lot of different industries, from consulting to telecom and financial services. He started at HSBC in 2004 in Tampa as head of program management for mortgages. Then he moved to Chicago and now in London. At HSBC, he runs all the change programs for the bank for risk, and also he's in charge of creating and implementing the risk ecosystem at the bank. So we'll have a presentation from Steve. We will then follow by Q&A. And don't hesitate to ask questions on the right side of your screen at the Q&A panel. And after that, we'll have a network. I would like to invite Steve to join us on stage. And if we were in the real world, I would say let's give a very big round of applause for Steve. Steve, could you join us?
Yes, Hugh, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you very well.
Hello, everybody. How are you doing? And thank you for having me. I'm also joined by Catherine Coffey. I think you can see her on the screen as well. So Catherine supports me on the innovation agenda. So as Hugh mentioned, I've got responsibility for running risk transformation globally. And also part of my hat and what I'm really passionate about is running innovation and digital transformation. So we're going to cover off some of those topics here. And then we'll open it up for Q&A, because I think we get the most out of kind of the back and forth in talking and hearing from you guys. But before I do that, Catherine, any quick introductions that you want to give?
As Steve said, I'm Catherine Coffey. I'm a change and implementation manager, and I work in the innovation and transformation space for global risk.
Thank you. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide, if you will.
I'll disappear now and I'll see you for the Q&A.
Thank you, Hugh. Thank you very much. So if you look at the slide, I really wanted to kind of give you a sense of how large our organization is. Some of the really interesting stats are we've got about 40 million customers. We process 1.5 trillion transactions a day. So imagine the size and the magnitude of that. And we're located, and I'm just going to pick a couple stats that to cover. We're located in 65 countries and territories around the world. So you could imagine, in being part of an organization this big and complex, the pace of change needs to keep up with the demand and change. And as you know, there's a lot more rapid regulation coming. There's new cybersecurity threats that we have to be responsive and making sure that we do our best to protect our customers and protect the bank. If I can ask you to go to the next slide, please. So understanding this, I think I'd like to use a quote from the Prime Minister of Canada. It really resonated with me. His quote is, "The pace of change has never been this fast, yet will never be this slow again." And I think it's very true. What he says is that if you guys think about how fast things are changing and how fast things are moving, it's just going to get even faster. And we need to be reactive, dynamic, and how we respond to that. If you go to the next slide. So what I wanted to kind of walk you through is how have we approached it from a risk innovation perspective, and how are we responding? So we knew that we couldn't develop innovation in a box behind a closed door and made innovation just part of a few select people that got involved in innovation, kind of the special people. And when I first started, that's what I saw. I saw locked rooms. You needed special badges to kind of get into the rooms. And there was these secret skunk work projects going on that people were developing. And when you ask them, hey, what are you doing? Or can I get involved? They're like, oh, no, it's quiet. It's top secret. And what we wanted to do is turn that on its head. And what we wanted to make it more about open innovation. And so our innovation program is really about how many people we can get involved in part of the process, because when you have a community as big as we do, there's a lot of great ideas out there. And I could tell you that if we solved it in one country or jurisdiction, I'm sure somebody else would have solved it in a couple other countries. And we could save ourselves time and money and effort if we're able to better coordinate, better to work together, better to share ideas on what works and doesn't work, and working through this. So what we did was we mobilized globally. We reached out to our network and we said, all right, here are the things that we're looking for. We want some very ambitious people with bright ideas that want to get involved in innovation, kind of want to challenge themselves. This isn't a new job. This is something that you do as part of your job, because we wanted to kind of install that innovation mindset. And we got a great response back. So we got about 200 people to say, you know what, sign me up. I'd love to help out. I'd love to participate. And we realized that we couldn't manage those 200 people. So what we decided to do was we structured in a way to where each region had its own lead and each sub-function within risk. So that's like credit or operational risk or resilience would identify someone that led risk innovation programs for what they were looking at. But we at the top made sure that we were able to kind of coordinate horizontally. And so we're really pleased that we saw a great appetite, a great demand to get involved, which was fantastic. I think that was, we sent out the email and it just came back and it showed us that we were on the right track. So if you can go to the next slide. What we did was we put a process together, a very high level process. Now you think about process and innovation and they don't really match up. Our goal is really to give people that haven't done innovation or done this type of work some guardrails. Because we have a large community, we have about 6,000 people within risk, we knew we could reach out to that crowd, get them involved and start working with us from great ideas. And oftentimes great ideas aren't just developed like, oh, I've got this great idea and everybody goes with it. It's just like all the businesses, they all pivot a certain set and they modify. So what we have is kind of this tool where you can put your ideas into an idea management tool and people can help you shape your ideas and work through your ideas. And it's a collaborative approach instead of I've got my idea, I'm keeping it secret to myself and working through it. So we have our community submit the ideas, go through the idea management tool. And then if you remember, I was telling you about the innovation leads. We have them come in and kind of curate all the ideas within their section and work through, you know, how do they shape their ideas? Are they good ideas? Do we want to prioritize those ideas and move those forward? And so through the system, we have this rating system to where the community can vote. Yes, we want to work on that, or no, we don't want to work with that, or I've already done that and we're working through that, and kind of really partner them up. The important part here is that we don't really stifle people's ideas and we keep it open. So we let people kind of work through it, and we want people to do POCs or proof of concepts. Now, these proof of concepts, we want done on environments that are very easy to spin up, give them access to data so that they have what they need. But we want this to be short 3-week sprints, max, to prove their hypothesis, to see, do we want to move forward or do we not want to move forward? And I think that's key because that's where people can develop their ideas very cheaply, very easily, and it's done in a sandbox. So it's in a bunker to where you're not impacting operations. It's in a protective environment and you work through it. If your POC takes more than 3 weeks, 3 or 4 weeks, then we're really challenging you on, are you really creating a minimal viable product? Because we want to make sure that it's an MVP. This is not a program. We're not putting steering committees together and working through this. We want you to either prove your idea or disprove it, and how do we make it better, and go through it. I think there was a great quote from the CEO of Intuit that said, if you're not embarrassed by your first prototype or your first MVP, then you've put too much work into it. And I'm a firm believer of that, because what we want to do is either prove it and disprove it. And then if it does get proved, then we can invest more and do more. And we've done a lot of really great POCs. And some of our best learnings came from our biggest failures. But because we make it very quick, rapid, and cheap, we're able to learn very quickly. And that's a key concept within innovation, is the people that can learn the fastest and the cheapest and can pivot and adapt are the ones that are able to find what the right solution is and how to push that forward. And it ties back to my comment about how fast change is happening and how dynamic you need to be. If I can ask to go to the next slide, please. I'll just cover this slide really quickly, and then I'll end up on the education slide. So this is our idea management tool. This is the tool that people can submit ideas. It's really great to have this centralized, because what it does is a senior person on our team can put out a challenge, or mostly a challenge of what keeps them up at night, or what problem do they have that they want the community to solve. So they'll put that challenge up, and people that'll go on and see the challenge says, oh, so-and-so has this challenge. I never really get a chance to interact with so-and-so because they're so high in the organization. And I've got some great ideas. And this way we create that connectivity between people lower end on the organization or in different countries with people that they normally wouldn't have access to, and they're sharing their thoughts and their ideas. And that's fantastic, because this gives people an avenue to be heard, to share ideas, and to get thoughts, and then we can build upon that. We also have gamification on the platform to reward people that submit the best ideas or the most voted ideas, and kind of work through that. And the important part about this idea management tool, you don't have to be an innovator and say, oh, I've got the perfect idea, and if I don't have the idea, I can't get involved. The involvement is, you could look on other people's ideas and you could say, wow, I really like what this person's doing. I would like to sign up with this person, volunteer my time and my effort to help them work and create their idea and work through it. And we've had great relationships with people from Hong Kong working with someone in Latin America on an idea that normally they wouldn't have never met or would have brought them together. This tool actually brings them together. They elaborate together, they succeed, and then they create an incredible friendship, but then also a tool that they can go off and deploy within their geographies. So we've gotten a lot of really great feedback on having this centralized tool that, again, is encompassing and allows us all to participate. The last slide before I open it up to any questions or comments is around what are we doing. So we tell people we want you to get involved in innovation, but it's not like we throw them in and say, all right, go innovate. What we want to give them are the tools that they need to innovate. And one of the key tools is really around Agile. If you're going to do innovation, you can't do it in the traditional waterfall mentality. It has to be Agile. A lot of the fintechs I work with, a lot of the big tech companies I work with, they all work in this method. And if you can't adapt or work in that same method with the speed and the turnaround, it's going to be very hard for you to get there. And it not only is it going to be hard, you're going to have to adapt so that you can work in this very fast feedback loop so that you can keep iterating and working through your ideas. And so that's why we spend a lot of time training our people on Agile. You can see we've trained about almost 4,000 people. I'm sure that number's gone up because we've deployed an online training. Another part within innovation is making sure you're working on the right problem. And oftentimes you go to a meeting and the loudest person in the room says, I know what the problem is and I know how to fix it. And then they go off, and seems to me that the solution usually is go build me a database, which seems to be the solution to a lot of my problems. And so what design thinking does, it actually makes you understand from a customer perspective, what is it that they want? What is it that they're telling you? But even beyond that, this is what they're telling you, but what does it really mean? and maybe the customer can't really articulate what the problem is or what the solution is, but at least they can describe it, and then you can go off and work with your teams and them to come up with a solution that really hits the problem. And I can tell you that if you don't solve the what problem first, it doesn't matter how well you execute, it doesn't matter how much money or savings you do. If you don't do what the customer is asking for you and get that right at the beginning, everything else will not give you kind of that value that you're working through. So that's why we partnered up with Stanford University, and we're going to be rolling out this course to our organization, because we're a key proponent and believer that design thinking is at the core of how we need to approach digital transformation and working through it. Another part of digital transformation is that cloud computing is going to play a large part in digital transformation. You're already seeing the big companies working through it, and they're able to deploy things onto their systems, use their marketplaces, and get up and running with new softwares and plugins and APIs that make development a lot more faster, a lot more nimble, enable for you to go to time to market much quicker at a reasonable cost, right? So it's, instead of paying this capital cost of all this infrastructure, you're paying for what you're using. And so we've invested a lot in working with the Googles, the AWSs, to train up our people so that they understand what does it mean to do cloud migrations? How do we get them cloud ready, both mentally and technically, and from a transformation perspective, so that we can take advantage of these new tools and we can prepare our employees for their future jobs. Whatever skills you had to get your job now aren't going to be the same skills that are going to be needed in 5 years to deliver transformation and deliver this. And so what we're trying to do is think ahead and make sure we're preparing our people. Just quickly, I'll talk about the nano degree. So that's something we put together. It's a 12-month program, which really is meant to bring people on that say, you know what, I don't know anything about technology, machine learning and AI scare me, and we don't know. Well, we understand that feeling, and what we want to do is bring everybody along in that journey with us. So we do this 12-month program where we teach people from beginners on, you know, machine learning, AI, Bitcoin, and understand how it all flows together and how these processes and techniques could have an impact. Our biggest wins have been when we put people together that know their function, know their business really well, with new technologies, and applying these new technologies, they've been able to do amazing and fantastic things. And once we let them test out doing these new technologies, their mentality is, I could never go back to what I used to do. And they really kind of move forward to being more digital and working through that. I guess I'm going to end up with just talking, and Hugh, you can maybe talk a little bit more about it, but we are working with CFT, with our internal university, to host courses. And again, that plays part of it, is really understanding what are the dynamics, what are things that are out there. And the good thing I like about the CFTE is that it's more outwardly looking. So instead of us looking for solutions and being inwardly focused, CFTE helps us look outwardly and see what other people are doing and get people connected. Like, for instance, in this environment that we're in now, where we're being able to network. So I know I've just kind of put a lot of information out there. Sorry it was so quick, but that was kind of the basis of what I wanted to cover. Maybe at this point, Hugh, we can open it up for questions.
Yeah, definitely. No, thanks a lot, Steve. That was really, really useful. We have a lot of questions. We have more than 10 questions. So we'll try to go
through most of them. Good. The more, the better, and the harder, the better, because Catherine's ready. So Catherine's ready to answer all hard questions. I'll take the easy one. Catherine will do the really hard one.
Very, very difficult questions.
Very difficult. Please, I'm sitting here. I want to watch.
Let me start with a very simple, underrated, overrated. If you can just say underrated, overrated on 5 topics, Steve.
I think some of them will be depends, because I think I know where you're going, and I see where you're going, but yes, I'll try my best.
Open banking.
Underrated.
Artificial intelligence.
Both overrated and underrated. So overrated for what people can, the smoke and mirrors, people say that it can do, but underrated from applying correctly will have a big impact to our lives.
Okay.
People are selling it a lot more than what it can really do right now.
Thanks. Challenger banks.
That I'd like to call a friend on that one. I don't know, Catherine. Challenger bank. I would say.
I would actually go quite diplomatic on that one.
Yeah, I would say neutral on that one. I think
neutral.
We can learn.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot to learn from, but then there's a lot of things that we have that are very hard to replicate.
Blockchain.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is me personally talking about Steve Suarez. So I'm not speaking on behalf of any organization. I think that the blockchain technology has a lot of potential. Again, now done right. I think a little bit underrated.
Okay, and last but not least, culture.
Culture is completely underrated, and people don't understand the importance. And if you don't have that right, nothing else falls into place.
Okay, thanks a lot. So that's a great transition.
That's probably what I'd say. We actually, yeah.
So
go ahead, Catherine. What?
I was just saying that's probably something that we actually, as change professionals, spend a lot of time focusing on, because if you can't deliver the culture, then change is very, very difficult to land.
And so that's actually the first question, which is how does HSBC deal with cross-cultural behaviors and attitudes?
I think just like any other organization, you have that, you're going to have to work through it. I mean, I think it's more of an art than a science, and you have to have the people in the middle that can understand different perspectives, understand what motivates and drives these people, and make sure that we're able to connect them up. And I think that's going to be key. I think it's a lot more listening and a lot less talking. And I think Stephen Covey has a really good one, is first seek to understand before you want to be understood. I really like his quote on that. And I've learned so much by making some bad assumptions that somebody else wanted something. And then when I finally realized what it is that wanted, there were things that I could align. And I think we often our references kind of lead us to decisions based on our frame of reference versus being open-minded and trying to understand people.
Thanks a lot. And about innovation, how do you know if innovation is a success or not? And specifically, what KPIs do you use?
That's a great question. And that one's a little bit harder. And Catherine, start kind of thinking about on your end. I'll kind of share some of the KPIs, and they're not really KPIs. Well, some of them could be KPIs. It's really a feeling and kind of the generating and seeing people's eyes. And, we do Dragon's Den. We have people come and present their ideas. We have people do hackathons and and it's kind of that twinkle in people's eye that they go to work, they're doing the same thing over and over again, but we give them an avenue to really show their creativity. And so I'd like to believe that if we lower attrition because people aren't going elsewhere to kind of satisfy that creative need, people are seeing advancements in their career, advancements in their understanding, in their in their knowledge about these technologies. It's great. I'll tell you a story. There was a lady that used to work for me, or she was there, and she was selected as being one of these leads. And I asked her to get up and present in front of everybody at one of the first meetings. And she whispered in my ear to say, "Steve, I'm really scared. I don't know what's going on. I don't understand some of this machine learning and AI." And I told her, it's okay. We're all going through this. And we went through it. And she did a beautiful presentation. It went really well. A year later, she's running the AI forum for the organization, driving the ethics change on AI, a lot of different parts. So she went from really not knowing much to be able to be considered a leader and working through this because she invested and worked through it. And those are the things I can't really put a KPI on. There are some things about how many of our POCs succeed, but I don't know, Catherine. What are your thoughts?
There are a few dynamics. So we measure. We're sort of semi-mature now in our program, so we're about 3 years in. So we have an opportunity to go back into year one, see what was put in production, and actually go and trace value. So we do trace value on pieces that are in production from a past tense. Another area that we look at also is that innovation is very much voluntary and side of desk for a lot of people. And we have lots of innovation related training that is open to that specific community. And we look at the engagement figures attached to that, and they're always really strong and high. So we measure by that. And also we have quite a robust reward and recognition program in place where it enables people who might not necessarily be recognized on a daily basis or have access, as Steve said earlier in his presentation, to senior leadership. It gives visibility. And then as part of that reward and recognition piece, we have an annual event that we run, which is Innovator of the Year. And with that piece, what we have is we have our innovation leads that have to pick one individual from their communities, which is a challenge in itself, and usually promotes a great deal of debate and argument at several meetings that they have to have when we're like, no, just one, no, just one. And then as part of that, they have to do elevator pitches, the shortlist, which then goes to senior leadership who vote first, second, third. And then there's a really big deal made at the end of the year in terms of communications. The backbone of it all is the communications part. It is giving people a voice. So we have a lot of innovation related communications, which means that people are actually, the angle of that is slightly different because POCs are discussed, they are showcased, and the people that are actually working on them are showcased as well. So then they're photo checked and name checked, so their faces are out there, so they start getting used to a little bit more notoriety and being contact points for programs that are pushing forward. And we're still there, you know, it's still going along nicely. Year 3.
I would say recognition is a big motivator, and it's cheap and it's free. Sometimes it's free, and just recognizing people is such a powerful tool. And we do a lot of that. So that helps us drive a lot of our innovation and it feeds the fuel to get more out.
Yeah. Another question on, I guess, results and, outcome. Could you give some examples of innovations that have come through this process?
Yeah, I mean, there's innovations where people have been able to use machine learning to get better scores for better decisioning. I don't want to kind of give any specifics but there's been stuff through using video surveillance to make decisions, facial recognition type stuff. So using a lot of really the latest technologies. It's funny, a lot of our analytics people seem to be the more geekier people that are kind of using some of these technologies and working through it. But then we have people like in physical security that are using that to things like drones to look at building facilities, finger swipes to kind of get in the house. And actually during, in the environment we're in, trying to have touchless entry and access management is actually something that's been pretty good. And it's got to be really good technology to make sure that it can identify you and work through it. So yeah, it's been a lot of different things.
I think there's a lot of emphasis as well, especially in the risk area, on simplifying and speeding up reporting. Better sources, single sources, so that there can be, greater clarity on how we can actually help our customers better. So that seems to be a big emphasis as well in what we're actually putting in place.
Is the current situation pushing the digital transformation agenda at a faster pace than before?
What was the, sorry, I didn't hear the first part of that question.
The current situation, so I guess the current COVID situation, pushing the digital transformation
without a
at a
doubt.
faster pace.
Yes, without a doubt. It's funny, the way people are making decisions now, you're really learning the word prioritization, and people are really understanding I've got to focus on the priorities and make sure we're doing it. So they're focused on the priorities. They're focused on a lot more of working in small pods and getting things through the process, making a lot faster decisions, and understanding how those decisions get applied out. So it is, and I think one of the things that everybody is hoping for is that that mentality and that approach stays with us, so that we don't forget that how fast and how dynamic we can be, especially in an environment that we're in now.
Thanks. I think I'm gonna start to have to collapse some of the questions, because there's a lot of questions. So one which is more in terms of the way you work, which is how big is the innovation team, who develops the POCs, and also what frameworks and languages do you use for NTPs?
Yes, so our community, like I said, is 200 people, but those are people that are self-nominated. Once we have a project or a program that people want to get involved in, it can grow again. So our community within Risk is about 6,000 people, and we are very much more open. Get involved if you want to get involved. And so I would say it ebbs and flows depending on what is that is needed. As far as our process, I showed our process earlier. We really want to make sure we're working on the right ideas, which is why design thinking is important. And we can't do every idea. So you can imagine we've gotten maybe 2,000 ideas. The reality is we have limited resources, limited money. And so what we want to make sure we do is use the best ideas, the ideas that we think we can deploy, drive out, and test those out to see very quickly, is it a good idea, and does it give us the expected result, or isn't? And if it doesn't, why didn't it? And so some, like I said, some of our ideas we did, and we found out it wasn't the right result, but then it drove us down a different angle, and we were able to pivot and then turn that into a successful POC that eventually ended up going to production. And the good thing about me being on the innovation side and on the transformation side is if I find little gems that work really well, I have the capability through my transformation team to grow those gems, because that's what they do for a living, and we can scale them. As far as languages, there's no language that we say people should be working with. I mean, there's a, it depends on who you talk to. Some people are, well, it's R or it's Python or it's whatever. We don't get into the decision of what language you should use. And actually, we try not to even get into decisions and solutionizing technology. We want them to develop the product, and then we start brainstorming, how can we solve it? And if we can solve it without using technology, even better. And some of the problems we have.
Thanks a lot. You talked about design thinking, and there was a question about how do you get people into this design thinking mindset, or I guess customer-centric mindset?
I think the course that we're bringing together is meant to be a 101. When I first went, I did my design thinking training at Stanford University, and I remember first going through the course, and I'm thinking, oh, this is all common sense. But as I was going through the course and really understanding it, I really kind of caught the bug and understood the powerful use of it. And again, if you look at it, everybody's, oh, this is, it's easy, this is common sense. And sometimes the greatest stuff is easy and common sense. We don't apply it. And so really understanding how to apply it and working through it, you can have the biggest impact by just listening to people, gaining insight and working through it. And design thinking teaches you a disciplined way of doing that and going through the steps and working through it. But you got to do it right. It's not about saying it. It's not about saying, oh yeah, we do design thinking. Or it's actually about doing it. And the same thing with Agile. If you got to have the right mindset, you have to do what you need to do in Agile. It's not about you being able to say, know the technical terms, Scrum, Sprint, and then all of a sudden that's all you need. You really have to believe it and live it.
Okay. Thanks a lot. There's still a lot of questions. So what I would suggest that if there's some questions that you would really like not to answer, audience, if you can just upvote them, that would be great. And a great question, I think, in terms of the issue for innovation is how do you combine innovation and your day-to-day? People are always super busy, so how can they innovate?
Yeah, Catherine, you want to take that, or you want me to?
Yeah, I mean, I've been really impressed being part of this world because the teams are really motivated. So regionally, our innovation leads have done an amazing job in engagement, building communities, pulling people together. Yes, sometimes you can have a tendency of where you actually see a bit of a concentrated group of people actually focusing on the innovation piece, and sort of a bit more motivated, whereas other people are a little bit like on the sidelines and a bit more curious about how it happens, but maybe not as confident. It is a relatively small community when you look at the size of the organization, but the motivation and the drive and curiosity and willingness to connect across the globe, and share lessons learned and look at opportunities of, okay, this POC worked here, would it be just as good to adapt it for this business area or another region? That cross collaboration is really quite inspiring, and that is how this whole program really operates, by the people within who are just willing to pull up their sleeves and be part of it.
Thanks a lot. You made a comment earlier on. The answer is usually go build me a database. Could you comment further on that?
Oh no, it's just joking around. It seems like oftentimes people come up with what they think the problem is. They come up with a solution, and then they design a solution, and they know exactly. So if you just listen to them and do exactly what they say, it's going to be a success. And I think we need to challenge that, right? Because not one person will see. Now there could be some great insight and working through it, but really you have to really understand what is the problem you're trying to solve. Make sure you understand that. And oftentimes it may not be a database. It may be a whole different solution. It may not even involve technology. It just seems that's kind of the common, go build me a database and that'll solve my problems. Basically saying, listen, don't worry about it. You don't have to use any brains. Just go build me this. Do exactly what I say. This is going to be successful. And then once we launch, we realize it doesn't really hit the mark. Then it's like, okay, well, where did it go wrong? And it's really about, again, using the design thinking to go back on, let's solve the right problem. And is that the problem we want to solve? And is that the biggest problem that we need to be solving right now versus somebody's pet project that they want to spend money on and to build?
Thanks a lot. And last 3 very quick questions, because we're going to run out of time. What do you think of the role of regulators to improve digitalization?
I think it's key, and you have to bring them along. They're going to be a key part of it. And the earlier you can bring them in what you're thinking and working, the better and more time you're actually going to save. I was asked to go out to Singapore to present to the MAS on risk innovation and the stuff we're doing. And it's funny because the chairman said, Steve, you're saying risk and you're saying innovation. Isn't there an oxymoron there between those two? And I think part of what I was trying to do is help them understand how we are approaching innovation. I think that was the point I was making earlier about having that bunker or that sandbox. I'm not playing with production. You never play with production. Production is always protected. It's always worked. We give people environments where they can test their ideas, play around, do what they need to do without jeopardizing anything for customers or anything else, and really making sure that people understand that. So I think regulators will play a big part of it. I think a lot of this technology is changing faster than they are able to keep up. And if you think about the big tech companies and think about us, it's hard for us to compete with the same talent that the Googles and the Amazons have and what they can do in some of this stuff. imagine the regulator, right? So we're all competing for the same talent, and we need to make sure that we can bring them along with us and make sure that whatever solutions we're doing is matching the needs and protecting our customers. We all have the same objective in mind.
And a very practical question, which is in the current environment, how do you keep innovation and motivation to innovate when you can't meet? And does virtual collaboration work?
Well, we're forced to do virtual collaboration. For instance, what we're doing.
Yes, it does.
So the virtual collaboration, I don't think I have to sell, because if any of you anywhere in the world have not been virtually collaborating for the last 6 to 8 weeks, then I'd be surprised if you're still around. So the virtual collaboration, we've proven, or I guess the situation has proven that it can work and we can be productive. It is hard. It is hard to keep innovation in the forefront, especially during this time. And you do have to balance your priorities and work things out. But there's always opportunities to look for better things. And while there might be a crisis going on today, and there's a lot of people dedicated to doing some piece of work, somebody with a great idea and a nice application or technology could come in and say, guys, I can solve that through this technology. And instead of needing hundreds of people, you need a lot less than that. So yes, you can stop looking to the future at a very short term, but eventually you'll have to start looking forward.
I think one of the silver linings here as well is, whilst maybe POCs into production may have slowed down over the last couple of months because of differing priorities, one of the beauties of this is actually using it as an opportunity to learn, because you can actually see maybe some opportunities where maybe we've got process steps or things in place that just might not be necessary. There might be overcomplicating issues, and it might be an opportunity to re-engineer, look at how we accelerate, our cloud strategies, look at other opportunities to see, well, how can we do this better? So from an innovation point of view, it's a bit of it incorporates a learning curve, I think, at this stage.
Last question from me. Because that's quite amazing in terms of all the different initiatives that you had for the employees, from agile, design thinking, knowledge of technology, etc. So if I'm part of HSBC, part of your group, that's great. I'm being very well trained. But if I'm just someone as a professional in finance who doesn't have all this support, how do I make sure that I have the right skills to be relevant? I think you're being muted. You're muted.
I think you're on mute,
Sorry.
Steve.
Yeah, I think it's a good question, and I think there are a lot of resources out there. And what we've done is curate a lot of free resources and brought them in. We've negotiated. There's a lot of really, I know a lot of the big tech companies want to attract more people to use their product, and they're making some of these classes free. I know, without kind of pushing any other companies, there's a lot of learning platforms out there now saying they're opening these classes for free. I think it does come down, there's no lack of information out there. It comes down to, are you willing to separate the time and invest and work through it? Platforms like your platform, platforms like edX, platforms like AWS or Google have this content out there where you can go ahead and start learning. And there are groups that are coming together to do study groups and working together that kind of help build a community of people that are like-minded, that want to learn about these things. And there's some universities, like Stanford University, for example, did a course on AI. And my son registered for it, and he's doing it. And it's one of the most popular courses that Andrew Ng has out there. I'm sure a lot of people have done the course, and it's top rated. And so the opportunity is out there. It's not as easy as what we've done, is compile it together and make it easy for people to do it. But with a bit of work, people can do it.
I think social business networking sites as well are quite good now for pointing you in the right direction if you just say the type of things that you're looking for. A lot of organizations or companies that maybe are selling or developing dashboards or visualization tools, they run free training that you can easily access. And I think probably trends that I'm seeing for young people leaving university, it's definitely coding as standard. It wasn't when I was leaving many years ago, but now, you know, the standard language of coding, I think, is definitely, you know, a way forward, because everybody's looking for, you know, abilities to automate. I think that's a really key thing in the business world now, automation.
Thanks a lot, Steve. Thanks a lot, Catherine, for your time. That was fascinating, very insightful in terms of your experience at HSBC.